Okay, this morning, Parshas Emor, we're Shishi. We're towards the very end of Shishi. We're just going to do, actually, Sukkot today. So let's take a look on page 686. It's Shishi. It's all about Sukkot. There is no holiday, by the way, as dependent upon Torah Sheba'al Peh, our oral law and our understanding of the Psukim based on Chazal, as Sukkot. And we're going to see how that plays a very important role and how Rav Soloveitchik understands these Psukim, alluding to important halachot, because always the halacha begins with understanding the pasuk. So page 686, Shishi, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, Daber al bnei Yisrael lemor b'chamisha soyam lachodesh hashvi'i hazeh Chag HaSukkot Shivat Yamim. It's on the 15th, the day of the 7th month, is the festival of Sukkot. It's a 7-day period for Hashem. Pasuk Lamed Hey. On the first day is a holy convocation. You shall not do any work. Shivat Yamin Takrivu Ishela Hashem B'Yom Hashmini Mikra Kodesh Yelochem V'Kraftem Ishela Hashem Atzeres Hi Kom Lechas Avodo L'Asasu. And for a 7-day period, you shall offer a fire offering to Hashem. And on the 8th day, there shall be a holy convocation, Shmini Atzeres, of course, for you. And you shall offer a fire offering to Hashem. It is an assembly, and you shall not do any work. Okay. These are the appointed festivals of Hashem that you shall proclaim as holy convocations, to offer a fire offering to Hashem, an elevation offering and its meal offering, and a feast offering and its libation, each day's requirement of the day. Then it says, Milvad Shabtot Hashem, Milvad Matotechem, Milvad Kol Nidrechem, Milvad Kol Nidvosechem, Asher Titnu LaHashem. Pasuk Lamed Ches, aside from Hashem's Shabbatot, and aside from your gifts, and aside from all your vows, and aside from all your free will offerings, which you shall present to Hashem. Ach b'chamisha sayom lachod hashashvi, v'as b'chemes vuas haaretz tachogu es chag Hashem shivas yamim, b'yom harishon Shabbaton, b'yom hashmini Shabbaton. Then it says, but on the 15th and the 7th day of the 7th month, when you gather in the crop of the land, you shall celebrate Hashem's festival of a 7-day period. The first day is a rest day, and the 8th day is a rest day. Ulekachtem lochem bayom harishon pri eitz hadar kapos tamarim va'anaf eitz avos parvei nachal usmachtem lifnei Hashem lokechem shivat yamim. Pasuk 40, pasuk mem. You shall take for yourselves on the first day the daled minim, right? The esrog, the lulav, the Hadassim, and the Aravot. And you shall rejoice before Hashem, your God, for a 7-day period. By the way, that's interpretation of exactly what the Torah means. I just gave you the Chazal's understanding of what the Dalet mean, what the 4 species are, right? And Pasuk Mem Aleph, you shall celebrate it as a festival for Hashem, as a 7-day period in the year, an eternal decree for your generations. In the 7th month shall you celebrate it. Basukot teshvu shivat yamim. You're going to sit in the sukkah. You should dwell in the sukkah for 7 days. Kol ezrach b'Yisrael yeshvu basukot. Every citizen, every native of Israel shall sit in the sukkot. L'man yedu. Why? So that everybody l'man yedu dosechem ki basukot shafti es b'nei Yisrael b'tziosam me'eretz Yisrael ani Hashem Elokechem. So that your generations will know that I caused the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I took them from the land of Egypt. I am Hashem, your God. And Vaydaber Moshe Ma'adei Hashem El Bnei Yisrael. It ends with, and Moshe declared the appointed festivals of Hashem to the children of Israel. So this parak, this aliyah, I should say, not parak, this aliyah is all about Sukkot, all about the holiday of Sukkot. And the Rav is bothered. Let's go back to these psukim that we just rattled off. Take a look at Pasuk Lamed Zayin 37. It says, Eilemo Hashem asher tiku osam mikroi kodesh, right? These are festivals of Hashem that you shall proclaim as holy convocations. Where is that place? That's smack in the middle of the Aliyah. But Sukkot is not yet finished. It's in the middle of the discussion of Sukkot. Eila Moadei Hashem. Eila Moadei Hashem. This pasuk sounds like the wrap-up pasuk. Here we've learned all of the Moadim, all of the holidays. May it be Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, right? Pesach, Shavuos, etc. We've listed them, and this pasuk belongs where? At the very end. It's a Eile Moadei. These are the festivals, and yet this pasuk seems to suddenly sneak into a middle of the discussion of Sukkot. It's a concluding pasuk, and it's in the middle of the discussion of Sukkot. It doesn't make sense. It's in the wrong place. And here, Rav Soloveitchik says, it actually may very well allude to a halachic debate that the rabbis had, the Rishonim, the medieval poskim in particular had, and I'll show you what that debate is. First, take a look at where it's placed. What precedes this pasuk of Lamed Zayin? The psukim tell us, Lamed Gimel, Lamed Dal, Lamed Hey, and Lamed Vav, tell us that Sukkot is a 7-day holiday, and when does it begin? On the 15th of the month of Tishrei. Isn't that what the first psukim do? And what do the psukim after this, Eila Moadei, do? And then it tells us, well, I'll tell you how to celebrate Sukkot. Celebrate Sukkot. Sukkot doesn't just, it's a holiday that has rituals. Which rituals? The Daled Minim and the sitting in the Sukkah, correct? Those are delineated after this pasuk. Before the pasuk, again, what's delineated? That you have a holiday of Sukkot and the date it occurs on, the 15th of the month of Tishrei, the 15th of the 7th month, which is Tishrei, correct? That's when Sukkot happens. That is told to you, the psukim preceding Eila Moadei, preceding Lamed Zayin. What happens after Lamed Zayin? The Torah tells you, it delineates, you have Daled Minim, you have the 4 species, you sit in the Sukkah. That is after. Why are you separating the two? Shouldn't you have everything like, okay, Sukkot. What is Sukkot? It's the 15th of the month, and this is how you celebrate it. You take Daled Minim and you dwell in the Sukkah for 7 days. And then where should this pasuk be? At the very end, not in the middle, right? It's in the middle of the discussion of Sukkot. If I would ask you, please describe here, it's a podcast. You're on the podcast. You're telling the world how you're going to celebrate Sukkot. What are you going to tell them? Everything. You're going to tell them, well, I sit in the Sukkah, I eat in the Sukkah, I sleep in the Sukkah. Correct? And Sukkot's day, we lift 4 species, and you're going to describe the lulav, the Sukkah, Dasim, and Aravos. That's what you're going to do. You're not going to interrupt it and say, okay, Sukkot is on the 15th of the month, and then say, okay, that's the holiday. And then come back and say, oh, by the way, what do you mean, oh, by the way? That's the problem with the positioning of this pasuk. So Rabbi Soloveitchik says it alludes to an interesting, remember, Sukkot, more than any other holiday, we need Torah Shabbat Peh. We need the oral law to explain what we are to do. We wouldn't know how to celebrate Sukkot just based on the psukim here in Parshas Emor. We wouldn't know what we're doing. That's what this is alluding to. Which halachic debate? The halachic debate is the second night of Sukkot, in Chutz La'aretz, in the diaspora. Everybody agrees that when you make Kiddush on Sukkot the first night, everybody agrees. Where do you place the Shehechiyanu? At the very end. This is what you do on Sukkot night. You say Kiddush, then you say the bracha le'shev basukah, and then you say Shehechiyanu. The Shehechiyanu is going to go on the Yontif, the Kiddush, and on sitting in the Sukkah. Is this the first time you're sitting in the Sukkah? Yes, as a mitzvah, correct? Is this the first time you're celebrating Sukkot and saying Kiddush for Sukkah? Yes. That everybody agrees. The Shehechiyanu comes at the very end. The debate is, what about the second night in Chutz La'aretz, where we are not sure we have an extra, right? We celebrate 2 days of no malacha in Chutz La'aretz, in the diaspora. In Eretz Yisrael, they only celebrate 1 day at the beginning, 1 day at the end. We celebrate 2, the beginning and 2 at the end. It's called Sveika Dioma. We're not sure when the day really was, when they would announce a new month via Re'iyah, via Eidim, via witnesses who would come to Sanhedrin and say, yeah, we saw the new moon. Well, What about the outlying communities that lived way outside of Eretz Israel? How did they get the information? They didn't have phones. They didn't have, how did they get it? And so maybe by the time they got it, it was a day off. So we have Sveiko Diyoma, right? 2 days to this very day. We live outside of Eretz Israel. We keep 2 days. So the Rav asks that there's an interesting debate. What about the second night? Where do you place Shehachiyanu? Again, the first night you place it at the very end. The second night, there is a debate. The Rambam says, do the second night just like you did the first night. Put Shehachiyanu at the very end. Rabbeinu Yaakov, quoted by Hagolas Maimonius, a commentary on the Rambam, says no. He says on the second night in Chutz La'aretz, this is what you do. Kiddush, Shehachiyanu, Leishei Basuka. The Shehachiyanu is not on the Leishei Basuka anymore. Why? Because you did that the previous night, right? You've already sat in the sukkah. So he argues, hey, you don't need to put the Shehachiyanu at the very end. Is everybody following me? You got it? That's the debate. And Rabbi Soloveitchik says, the placing of this pasuk alludes to that debate. Are you saying, like Rabbeinu Yaakov, meaning there are two different components of sukkahs. It's the date and then sitting in the sukkah. Two separate things. So Rabbeinu Yaakov says, hey, look, it alludes to it, right? Hey, first you say Shehachiyanu on the first night on everything, but on the second night, the psukim even separated. There's sukkahs, and there's what? There's sukkahs, the holiday, and then there's what? The observance of rituals. What are they? Sitting in the sukkah, lifting the dalaminim. We don't say, by the way, another Shehachiyanu on the second night, on the second day, on dalaminim. We've already said it once, right? We only say it on the first day, correct? Once you said it, you've said it. And that's but the Rambam rejects this. And the Rambam says, 1 second, if you sat in the sukkah on the wrong day, that means the Leishei Basuka that you said yesterday was not null and void as well, correct? It wasn't mean anything. It really wasn't sukkahs. Are you following? Are you following what I'm saying? So the Rambam says no. On both days, put Leishei Basuka, Shehachiyanu where? At the very end. And Rabbeinu Yaakov says, no, there are two different components. Clearly, the Torah interrupted sukkahs, and it didn't present it in one sweep. It didn't present it in, okay, the date and the rituals together. It interrupted it with Eila Moadei Hashem. Why did it interrupt it? Because there are two different aspects of the observance of sukkahs. You following me? And that, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, is already alluded to. This is just a lumdish insight of Rav Soloveitchik on understanding everything in sukkahs is alluded to in the psukim, but you need the sages to come along and to explain how we observe this halacha more than any other halacha. Take a look now. I'll show you another. Take a look now in the sex. So there are two parts of sukkahs, right? There's the sukkahs on the 15th of the month of Tishrei. That's we're told. And then what are the rituals? Well, dalaminim and sitting in the sukkah, correct? Well, let's take a look at Pasuk Mem 40. Ulekachtem lochem bayom harishon. And on this day, you'll do what? Ulekachtem lochem bayom harishon, Pri Hadar, which we translate how? What do we translate Pri Hadar? This beautiful fruit. That's an esrog, right? Kapos tamarim, the anaf eitz avos, the arvei nochal. And we then kapos tamarim is the lulav. The anaf eitz avos is the hadassim. Arvei nochal is the aravos. Usmachtem, and you shall celebrate. Lifnei Hashem lokechem shivat yamim. You shall celebrate you for 7 days before God. So how many mitzvahs are mentioned? How many actions are mentioned in this pasuk? How many actions are mentioned in this pasuk in Mem? And Rabbi Soloveitchik says, read carefully. Ulekachtem lochem usmachtem. There are two actions. There's one called lekicha. You take the lulav and esrog, right? What do we do with the dalaminim? We lift it. By the way, when have you performed the mitzvah? As soon as you lift them. As soon as you take the esrog, the lulav, the hadasim aravos in your hand, you've performed the mitzvah. So what do? We want to make the bracha first, and then we want to perform the mitzvah. So what's the minig? We turn the esrog upside down, right? And then after we make the bracha, we turn it I. Why do we do that? Because we always want to make the bracha before we perform the act. But if lifting is ulakachtem, if the mitzvah is just lift, I lifted it off the table, I've done the mitzvah, correct? So that's why some people, by the way, don't have that custom that I just mentioned. You know what some people do? They leave it on the table. They're looking at it, and they make the bracha on the tilas lulav, and then they lift it. Because you always want to make the bracha before you do the mitzvah. When do you make the bracha? Before you light the candles on Hanukkah, right? When do you make the bracha? Before you read the Megillah on Purim. When do you make the bracha? Before you blow the shofar. You always make the bracha. Al over la'asyasan is the words of the rabbis. You always do the bracha before the act. But the pasuk says, what's the act? Ulekachtem. Translate the words. And so it's literally, as soon as you lift it, you've performed the mitzvah. So again, there are ways to overcome the problem of what I lifted it. The bracha is going to be after I did the mitzvah, and a bracha cannot be after you did the mitzvah. It has to be before you do the mitzvah. The bracha is the introduction to the mitzvah. So ulekachtem is one act, but then the pasuk says usmachtem. What's usmachtem? Celebrate, right? May I ask you a stupid question? How do you celebrate with Daled Minim? Where's the simcha of Daled Minim? Oh, very good. That's correct. That's exactly what the Meiri says. Do you know how? That's correct. You don't just lift it, usmachtem. And the Meiri says you shake it during Hallel. You shake it. That's the performance of the simcha of the mitzvah is through shaking through Hallel. And that's exactly what we do. And now Rabbi Soloveitchik says, so let's take a look at the Rambam. The Rambam has an interesting comment about lifting. Until you analyze, you cannot learn these psukim without learning Torah Sheba'al Peh together. And that's what Rabbi Soloveitchik's pointing out. And the Rambam, he says, if you read the Rambam very carefully, there's something fascinating. When you shake the lulav and the Daled Minim, there are Daled Minim, right? There are 4 species. You have the lulav, hadasim aravos in your right hand, and what do you have in your left hand? The esrog. Why do you have in your right hand the lulav, dasim, and aravos? Because there are more of them than, right? There are more of them than the esrog, even though the esrog is what costs the most money. The esrog is the most difficult of them to buy a perfect one, correct? But the lulav, hadasim aravos go in the right hand, which is always perceived as the stronger hand. So if you're a lefty, what would you do? By the way, you would move the lulav and esrog and the lulav, hadasim aravos to your left. You put the 3 in your strongest hand. Usually that's the right hand for most majority of people in the world. They're righties. I think it's 80% against 20%. I think I read not long ago. So it's quite a majority of most people are righties. Okay, there was a time, do you remember, where if you were a lefty, they insisted that they were going to teach you how to be a righty?
So, yeah.
That's right. Okay, so anyhow, so let's go back to here. The Rambam says you lift it in your right and you put the esrog in your left. But what do you shake? Listen to the words. I want you to listen to the words of the Rambam in Hilchos Sukkah. He says the following: "Umitzvah ki hilchasa." How do you do the mitzvah correctly? Sheyagbia aguda shel shlosha, meaning you lift the 3 species as they are bound together. Biyamin in the right hand, the esrog bismol, and you put the esrog in the left. V'yolich v'yavi, you go in, out, right? V'yaleh v'yorid, up, down, V'yina'anea, and you shake halulav, shlosha pa'amim, b'chol ruach v'ruach, and you shake it, the lulav, in each direction 3 times, correct? Isn't that what we do? What did we shake? Listen to the words of the Rambam. V'yina'anea halulav. He doesn't mention the esrog. Esrog, yeah, of course you're going to shake the esrog. But what is the essence of the simcha? The simcha is shaking the lulav. And the Rav notes, now I understand. What's the bracha? What's the bracha on the dalaminim? On the tilas lulav. Why on the tilas lulav? Because the Rambam is noting it's the lulav that is the most important. It is not the esrog. Even though everybody says everybody spends a lot of money on the esrog. Very few people, when you go buy lulav and esrog, everybody's looking at the esrog. I gotta have the lulav is the most important because the lulav has the hadassim and aravos, and that's the one that the Rambam says is actually to shake. And he says another interesting halacha. When do you make the bracha al netilas lulav? So many people have the minig, the custom to get up early, to go into their sukkah before they go to shul, and to make the bracha and to shake. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, my father, based on this Rambam, disagreed. He said, that's not the right time to make the bracha. When do we make a bracha about a mitzvah? Right before we do the mitzvah. And now you're learning something from the psukim based on the Rambam, how the Rav understood it. The Rambam is teaching us, interesting, how do you observe daled minim? How do you observe it? You lift it and you shake it, right? The shaking is a manifestation of the halacha of simchas lulav ve'esra. You're to celebrate. Well, how do you celebrate the daled minim? You shake him during the Hallel. That means that a component of lifting the lulav and esrog is what? Shaking. And therefore, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, my father taught me, when do you make the bracha? When is the appropriate time to make the bracha on netilas lulav? Not early, not when you wake up in the morning and go into a sukkah. When are you supposed to do it? Right before Hallel. Right before you're going to perform the entire mitzvah, because there are two components of the mitzvah. If I would test you and I would say to you, please describe the mitzvah of netilas lulav, now what would you say? Well, there are two components. There's lifting and there's waving, right? And one is ulakachtem and one is smachtem, but there are two components. Therefore, when do you make the bracha? Right before you perform both. And when are you going to perform it? Right before Hallel. So he would stop, and which what we do in shul, I announce, right before Hallel, we're taking 2 minutes. Please lift your lulav and make your bracha. As soon as you do that, we're now going to start Hallel. Right? Unlike a lot of people that have the custom to do it early. Why do they have the custom to do it early? They want to demonstrate the love of mitzvah, so they run to do it. Rabbi Soloveitchik, based on his father, says, I think that might be a halachic problem. What's the halachic problem? Having an interruption between the bracha and the act. So what the Rav learned from this pasuk, based on the Rambam, is a halacha, two halachos. One, ulekachtem usemachtem. There are two components to netilas lulav, not just lifting, but shaking. And lukachtem is lifting, and the shaking is a manifestation of the simcha of the pasuk. And number two, if that's the case, when do you make the bracha? You make the bracha right before you perform both. Number three, the Rav points out, the pasuk says, this pasuk is daled minim. You don't know daled minim without, if you read this pasuk, you won't know a thing how to celebrate Sukkot. You won't. It says, on the first day of the Yontif, meaning the 15th of the month, it's Sukkot, right? Please take Priyetz Hadar. What's Priyetz Hadar? The beautiful fruit. I can say a pomegranate is beautiful. I don't know, go outside and look, and we can have different opinions, right? Of which one is the most beautiful fruit in the world. And the rabbis gave us the answer. Without Torah Shebaal Peh, you wouldn't know a thing on how to celebrate this holiday. So Priyetz Hadar is found only because what? The rabbis told us and not only that, by the way, Sukkot, of all of the holidays, historically, became a debate with the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Who are the Pharisees? The Rabbanan, the rabbis. The Sadducees believed whatever is written in the Bible, that's how we observe it, right? And if it's not written in the Bible, we don't believe in Torah Shabbat Peh. Nonsense, because even today, even in America, there's a constitution. That's your Torah Shabbat Sav, if you will. And then there's the Torah Shabbat Peh. It's called the judicial decisions on how to interpret the Constitution, correct? So the Sadducees disagreed bitterly on how they celebrated Sukkot, totally different than we did. We have a tradition based on Torah Shabbat Peh. They had a different tradition. By the way, there was a number of different debates between them. The mitzvos of Arava, there's a mitzvah of Arava, right? On Hoshana Rabbah, where we shake the Aravos and we bang them, okay? And when there was a Beis Hamikdash, there was Nisu Hamayim, the libation of water. And the Sadducees said, where did you get that? That's not mentioned in the rabbis. And the rabbi said, that's how we have a tradition of Torah Shabbat Peh, understanding and explaining all of this. Continue on. In the pasuk says, so you lift pre-eitz adar, and then kapos tamarim, anaf eitzavos, and arvei nochal. What's arvei nochal? The aravos, the willow, correct? How many mitzvahs are associated with the aravos? How many mitzvahs on Sukkot are associated with the aravos?
Oh, you did.
2. One is Daled Minim, and then Hoshana Rabbah, Aravos, correct? So, one second, how many mitzvahs are associated with the Esrog? 1. How many mitzvahs associated with the Lulav? 1. How many mitzvahs are associated with the Hadassim? 1. Aravos, 2. Aravos on Sukkot is a mitzvah to do what? Daled Minim, it's one of the 4 species, and what else? And Aravos on Hoshana Rabbah, correct? So you have 2 mitzvahs associated with Aravos. And the Rav scratches his head and says, whoa, 1 second. If I was asked prior to this Torah Shabbat Peh, which of the Daled Minim should have more than 1 mitzvah, which one would you pick up? Yeah, of course, the Esrog, maybe the Lulav, but the Esrog certainly. Why not? And which one would be the one that you least choose? The Aravos is the cheapest. And not only that, you remember the Medrash in Vayikra Rabbah describes the Daled Minim based on the Jewish people. It says, we bundle all of the four species because it represents what? All kinds of Jews. And what do? It's an aguda achas. What's an aguda? It's bound together. We bind all of the Jews together. So what's the esrog? The esrog has a flavor. It has a value of fruit, and it has a beautiful aroma. Who's that? That's the Jew who is a scholar and a good person. He has both. He has wonderful social skills, and he has scholarship. Correct? He's the ultimate Jew. What's the lulav? The lulav produces fruit, right? Dates. The lulav produces fruit, but it has no aroma. So it's the Jew who is the scholar, but he doesn't have very good social skills, right? Number 3, what's the hadassin? Hadassin smell, have a beautiful aroma, but there's no value from an edible point. So who's that? Person who has social skills, but he doesn't have any Torah. He's ignorant. And who's the Arava? None of them. He's not a scholar and he's not a good person. But we bundle it, and that's the one Rabbi Soloveitchik says should have 2 mitzvahs. What is the thinking? What is the thinking? So the Rav points out just the opposite. This is the first allusion to Kiruv Rechokim, to bringing all types of Jews into the fold that we know of, right? This concept of being open and inclusive to every Jew is right here in the Torah on Sukkot. The Arava becomes the center of 2 mitzvahs to teach us that the person who's missing the most, the one who would feel the rejection the most, is the one that you have to focus on the most. Correct? On Yom Kippur, who saw the Kohen Gadol do his service? The elite of the Jewish people, the Kohanim and the Leviim. And where were the regular Yisraelim? They weren't there. They weren't there. They felt totally, if you will, outside of the pale. Not everybody came to Yom Kippur to the Mikdash. Who saw the whole avoda? Kohanim and Leviim, the elite of the Jewish people. What about the regular citizen? When does he come? He comes after Yom Kippur. He comes on Sukkot. He comes after we receive the kapara, after we receive the atonement. We say, no, come and join us. All Jews join us because we need a unified people. And that's why the Arava has two mitzvahs, right? To teach us this lesson of inclusivity of all of the Jewish people. And then the pasuk continues to take a look. The Chagosem also Chag Shivas Yamim Bashana. I'm sorry. Pasuk Mem. L'kachtem lachem bayom harishon pri etzador kapos tamarim. We've noted usemachtem, and you shall celebrate. Right? This word, the Rav teaches us a fascinating halacha. I want to ask you a question. If God forbid somebody loses their relative and they're sitting shiva, right? It can happen. So people die all the time. People are born and people die. So I've officiated at funerals between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. People die. So person gets buried before Sukkot. What happens when Sukkot begins? What do you mean? It's aborted. It's finished. The yeshiva is finished. You don't sit shiva for 7 days. I had a case where I remember from my father, a person passed away on Erev Yom. He did the funeral on Erev Yom Kippur. So what happens on Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur stops the Shiva. And what happens with Sukkot? Sukkot ends the Shloshim, correct? How do we know that? How do we know that? Let me ask you another question. A person, God forbid, dies this week and Shabbos comes. Does the Shiva end? Shiva never ends with the Shabbos, correct? So one of the answers that you may, whoops. Okay. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Were you hearing the whole thing until now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
We've been
Okay.
hearing everything.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so the Rav wants to know, at Shabbos, when the Shiva, it doesn't end the Shiva, correct? But a Yom Tif, it ends. How do we know it ends? From this word, usamachtem, in this pasuk, the rabbis say, what does smachtem mean? And you should celebrate. Who's celebrating? The individual or the community? The community. When you have a tension between an individual and a communal celebration, which takes precedent? Of course. So your individual mourning has to recede against the communal need for simcha. Correct? Also, emotionally, can a person be mourning and be happy at the same time? No, they're contradictory psychological states of mind. So the pasuk is telling us, usmachtem, when Yom Tov begins, what is the halacha? A sense of simcha, correct? You have a sense of simcha. Therefore, it's a communal obligation. What happens to my individual avelus? It stops. It can't live. Simcha and avelus cannot live in the same universe together. Correct? So what happens to the avelus? The avelus ends. Shabbos, is there halacha and simcha on Shabbos? No. On Shabbos, there's kavod and oneg. There's honoring and there's a delight. We have good foods, etc. on Shabbos, but we don't have a halacha of simchat Shabbos. Simcha is a Yom Tov concept. Simchas Yom Tov. Shabbos doesn't have a simcha, and that's why Shabbos doesn't abort Avelus. You never have an abortion, a stopping of Avelus because it encountered Shabbos. What about Yontif? Always. A Yontif encounters Avelus. The two cannot live together. One is a communal obligation. One is an individual obligation. And the individual, it's a tremendous musar, it's a tremendous ethical, moral concept in Judaism. The community comes before, it takes precedent. The community's celebration takes precedent over the individual's mourning. And the individual's mourning ends, and the simcha must be observed. Follow? You're following? That's what this pasuk teaches us. And not only is it the simcha of this Yontif, it's the simcha of all Yomim Tovim, right? And the Rav notes of all of the holidays of the year, Sukkot has the word simcha appear more than any of the other. Which holidays of the year does the Torah not mention simcha, by the way? Pesach. Pesach, the word simcha does not appear in the Torah. Does it apply to Pesach? Yes, because we say Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot are one unit. The rabbis taught us. So whatever is applicable to one Yontif is applicable to the other of those three in the unit. The same thing, by the way, by Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The Rosh Hashanah has simcha, and you're going to say, simcha? We can't eat. What kind of simcha is there? So the rabbis answer, well, we get dressed up nicely, right? We bathe and we clean ourselves before Yontif. We get dressed nicely. We wear clean clothing. We wear special clothing on Yom Kippur. That's the simcha of Yom Tov, right? Of Yom Kippur. Every one of the Yomim Tovim has the component of simcha. But which one does the Torah underscore simcha? It is Sukkot. Why? Because when does Sukkot occur? Right after Yom Kippur. And what happened in Yom Kippur? We received atonement. Oh, we received kapara. Now, Sukkot celebrates that reality. It celebrates. Sukkot offers us the time to celebrate the fact that we received the atonement. Continues on in the pasuk. Then it says, pasuk mem, usmachtem. What's the next word? Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem Shivat Yamim, and you shall celebrate them 7 days before God. Simcha occurs only when sin is removed. Man attains forgiveness on Yom Kippur, and now what does he have? What is simcha? By the way, how does the Torah define simcha here? Usmachtem, what's the next word? Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. And the Rav notes, by the way, every time you see the word simcha in the Torah, it is always followed by the word Lifnei Hashem. What does that mean? It's not a sense of simcha, a sense of having a good time, abandonment. I can drink and get drunk and dance. No. Usmachtem, Judaism defines simcha as Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. It's a direct relationship with God. Simcha for man is real simcha is not an abandonment of his of rules. Rather, it is a concept of I have a direct relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that simcha is found clearly on Sukkot because it comes immediately after Yom Kippur. Although we say Sukkot is a holiday of joy, we should note that it's special. And how do I demonstrate that? Chazal did something on Sukkot that you would say, you scratch your head and say, but it's a Yom Tov of Simcha, and this is a contradiction. Which Megillah do we read on Sukkot? Every Yom Tov, that's correct. Every Yom Tov has its Megillah. Pesach is Shir HaShirim. Shavuot is Ruth. Sukkot is Kohelet. Kohelet is one of the most depressing books in the entire Tanakh. It's a book of contradiction, right? It's a book of, should we be happy? Shouldn't we be happy? It's all a book of contradictions. So why would Chazal bring Kohelet into Yontif, into Sukkot? So the Rabbi Soloveitchik says, no, Chazal is teaching us that the contradictions of Kohelet is a component of Simcha. When you you're associating simcha with lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, you realize that we're not flying on the same plane as God. God is the infinite. We're the finite. And the simcha is coming to the realization that we don't understand what God does. God is infinite. We're finite. With lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. You know when you get a sense of simcha in life? When you're able to resolve the contradictions. How do you resolve the contradictions? Are we ever going to get an answer to the contradictions? No. Man doesn't get answers to the contradictions because man is down here and God is up here. We're not flying on the same plane. God is infinite. We're finite. And when we accept lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, He's in charge, then you're happy. Then you have, what does simcha mean? What do you mean happy? It means a resolution, correct? A resolution to I'm not feeling torn. I have a sense of shleimus because I understand He's in charge and not I. That's lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. The Rav points out that the Torah has two different psukim associated with sukkot, where it says simcha. One is here with Machtem Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem Shivat Yamim, right? You see it on Pasuk Mem. And where's the other? My Bar Mitzvah Parsha Re'eh. V'samachta b'chagecha. Why do you need two psukim to teach us that we have to celebrate? And the Rav explained that the second pasuk refers to the specifics of rejoicing. When the Torah tells us v'samachta b'chagecha, it's telling us how the Jew is to rejoice. The Gemara in Pesachim, Kuf Tes 109a says, you know how you celebrate Yontif? You celebrate Yontif by eating meat, by drinking wine, by wearing beautiful clothing, by distributing treats to the children, that etc. etc. This rejoicing, explained the Rav, was the situation of the Jew in Eretz Yisrael. When did Sukkot occur in the agricultural cycle? After you've harvested, you've put away everything for the winter, everything. You're as the Rav quotes, the Jew saw his grain silo full, his wine cellar filled, his olive press full. Everything was in its right place, and now I can celebrate. He felt secure for the coming year. It was an agricultural society, correct? His rejoicing was an expression of gratitude to Hashem. I have my silo is full, my wine cellar is full, my olive press is full. I can lay back. I'm going to have a good winter. I'm taken care of, correct? So it's a sense of, what is the simcha? Of gratitude to the Almighty. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, by the way, the American holiday called Thanksgiving was based on Sukkot. The pilgrims they knew their Bible. They knew their Bible very well, their Old Testament. And they looked at a model for Thanksgiving. What was it? Thanksgiving was Sukkot. It was the way to thank God for having everything right, everything in an abundance. Now we can rejoice because we have a sense of gratitude for the plenty that we're blessed with. This period, Rabbi Soloveitchik said, unfortunately lasted for only a very short time in Jewish history, right? Only for a few hundred years. This picture that we're having. But then there was another form of simcha that Chazal created. And Yontif, it's called, on Sukkot, we have many simchas, right? We have simcha of samachta b'chagecha. We eat meat, we drink wine, we celebrate, right? We have nice clothing, that's the samachta b'chagecha. Then there's another simcha. It's called simchas beis hashoeva. What's simchas beis hashoeva? There's no wine. It's not a celebration of wine and of the olive press and the grain. What is it? Of water. Of water. When does it take place? During the day or at night? At night. Simchas Beis HaShoeva was celebrated by the Jews in the Beis HaMikdash at night. How did they light up the Beis HaMikdash? There was no illumination, so they lit torches. And they threw them in nights and they juggled, as the Gemara describes. They said, if you didn't see the Simchat Beis HaShoeva, you did not see a celebration in your life. That's the words of the Gemara. It was only in the time when it was opaque, when you couldn't see clearly. It was night. You would think that you're not seeing clearly. And what did you celebrate? Water. Water is the basic foundation of all humanity, correct? It's not a celebration of extras. It's the celebration of the basics, right? This celebration was totally dependent upon a feeling of Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. Sukkot is the holiday of Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. Our whole simcha, the rabbis were teaching us, is one of feeling the presence of God in our life. Of course, we know that. We go out, where do we live? We live outside. With the protection of whom? Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. Right? We need Hashem. Do we have a secure hut? It's a hut. It's not a house. We leave our homes and we say our simcha is going to be Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. And that's why it was at night, not during the day, because who do you have to trust at night for your protection? You don't see, you can't protect yourself. It's very difficult to protect yourself at night, but you protect yourself during the day. So at night is when Simchat Beis HaShoeva is. Sukkot is all about this. So if I would ask you, what does this Samachta B'Chagecha mean, and what is Utzmachtem Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem? This Samachta B'Chagecha is, how do you tell me physically, how do you celebrate? You have wine, you have meat. That says, what's Utzmachtem Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem? In this pasuk, it's telling us the emotional, psychological celebration that the Jew has. And what is that? Realizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in charge. And I have a relationship with God. Finally, then the pasuk says, the Torah tells us, Mem Beis, Pasukos Teshvu Shivas Yamim. You shall dwell in a sukkah for 7 days. The Gemara, the Rav quotes the Gemara in Sukkot, Tov Ches Amud Beis 28b, that establishes the principle. How are we supposed to celebrate? How are we supposed to live in the sukkah?
Live in it.
Yeah, well, there's a principle. What is it? The principle is Teshvu Ke'ein Teduru. You live in it like you live in your house. Your home, your sukkah becomes your 7-day house. Whatever you do in your house, you're to do in the sukkah. And the Gemara then goes on and it says, you have nice furniture in your house, have nice furniture in the sukkah. You have nice utensils in the house, have nice utensils in the sukkah. What are you not allowed to bring into the sukkah, the Gemara says? The Gemara says, do not bring soiled dishes. Do not bring anything ugly, if you will, inappropriate. You're to make the sukkah beautiful. Why? The pasuk says, the Gemara says, Teshvu Ke'ein Teduru. You're to make your dwelling in the sukkah like you would make your house. Do you beautify your home? Yes. That's why we have the custom of beautifying a sukkah, right? We hang pictures in the sukkah. We have pictures in our home. My daughter, Adina, said, Abba, if that's the halacha, then you have pictures of the family in the house. You have to have a picture of the family in the sukkah. So she makes sure that we have one picture with everybody in the, it's just a cute point. It's a cute point. But bottom line, during the 7 days, the Gemara says, Teshvu Ke'ein Teduru. And the Rav asks an interesting question. Tell me, where do we get this concept, Teshvu Ke'ein Teduru, that you are to dwell in the sukkah like you are to dwell in your home? Maybe it comes from a different pasuk. There's a different principle in the Gemara. There's another Gemara in Shabbos, Kuf Lamed Gimel Amud Beis 133b, that discusses a principle in mitzvahs. It's called Idur Mitzvah. Beautify your mitzvah. You do a mitzvah, you do it in a beautiful way, right? You're to improvise that the mitzvah is not just done, the mitzvah is done in a beautiful way. And the Gemara, by the way, says, as an example, sukkah noah. You're to have a nice sukkah. You should have a real nice sukkah. You shouldn't have a little shack. You should make a real nice sukkah, and you should beautify it as nicely as possible. So it says sukkah noah. So Rabbi Soloveitchik asks a fantastic question. Maybe sitting in the sukkah, which I just described, bringing in the furniture, the Gemara says, bringing in the nice utensils, maybe that's a component of beautifying. How do you know it's Teshvu ke'ein teduru. How do you know it's a component of the mitzvah of the way you dwell in your house is the way you dwell in your sukkah? So the Rav argues, I can prove it to you. I can prove it to you. It's not Hiddur mitzvah. Hiddur mitzvah is another halachic principle. There is a very specific, unique halacha in sukkah. What is it? The way you live in your home is the way your sukkah is to be treated during sukkah. Your sukkah becomes your home for 7 days. Correct? Ke'ein tedura. And it's not a component of Hiddur mitzvah. And how does the Rav present that? He says, the Gemara on Memches, Amid Aleph, the Gemara in Sukkah 48a discusses how one is to leave a sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. Not it's talking about in Eretz Yisrael. Remember, when does sukkahs end in Eretz Yisrael? Hoshana Rabbah. Shmini Atzeres is a new mitzvah. When do we do it? We do it by Simchas Torah. We still dwell in the sukkah by Shmini Atzeres because of that question that we talked about. Sveika Diyoma, which day is really the Yom Tov? And we celebrate 2 days at the end of Yom Tov. October 7th was Simchas Torah in Eretz Yisrael. October 7th here was Shmini Atzeres. We didn't celebrate. Sunday was Simchas Torah. That Shabbos was Shmini Atzeres and Chutz La'aretz. So the Gemara asks a fascinating question. It says the following: on Hoshana Rabbah, Sukkot ends. So in a typical fashion, what are you supposed to do when you leave the sukkah? What do you not want to do? You do not want to turn your sukkah into an extra day in Eretz Yisrael because that would violate adding to sukkahs. It's not 7 days; it's 8 days. Lo sosifu. We don't do more than what the Torah. We don't do less than the Torah. We don't do more. Right? The Torah tells us that you are to observe the way the Torah tells you. So you don't want to add another day to sukkahs. How many days in Eretz Yisrael is sukkahs? 7 days. So what happens? The Gemara says at the end of Hoshana Rabbah, right before Shmini Atzeres, what are you supposed to do? Take your furniture back into the house. Take your utensils back into the house. Right before Hoshana Rabbah ends, that last hour, you're shifting out of the sukkah and you're bringing it back into the home. That's what the Gemara then asks. And what if you don't have a home? What if you're a poor person and you only have a hut? You only have a sukkah. You don't have a beautiful home. What are you supposed to do? How are you going to demonstrate that it's not being sukkah extended? Is everybody following the question?
Yeah.
Right? You don't have that. The Gemara talks about how do you do for the regular person? They have a home and they have a sukkah. So what do they do on Hoshana Rabbah as sukkah ends? They move back into the home. They take everything out of the sukkah and bring it back into the home. And what if you don't have a home? How do you demonstrate it's not now sukkah 8 days? So the Gemara says, interesting. The Gemara, maybe you should bring in the soiled dishes into the sukkah. Now change it. So Rabbi Soloveitchik says, it's not talking about Hiddur mitzvah. The Gemara is not saying if it's Hiddur mitzvah, the Gemara would say, hey, you can't do that. But the Gemara is saying, no, you do that. Why? Because the principle of sukkah is not a component of beautifying the mitzvah. Yes, we beautify the mitzvah, but that's its own principle. There's a unique principle when it comes to sukkah. What is it? Treat the sukkah like your house. Because if it was just beautifying, it would never have said, bring in the soiled dishes, right? As the demonstration. It's rather demonstrating that the whole principle guiding sukkahs was what? Teshvu ke'ein teduru. Treat the sukkah like you would your home. Okay, this is a lot of lumdis in the shiur. It's a lot of lumdis, but it was demonstrating to us of all of the holidays on the year, which one is the most dependent upon Torah Shabbal Peh, interpreting the psukim. You have the text. Here is the Constitution. How do you interpret the Constitution? You would not make heads or tails in this holiday just based on Eresh B'Tzav. You would not know anything about Daled Minim. You would not know what the halachos of sukkah is. By the way, how do you build a sukkah? That's the whole Torah Shabbal Peh. Do you need, how many walls do you need? You say, what do you mean how many walls? I know what a building is. It's 4 walls. No, not when it comes to sukkah, right? How high? All of that is Torah Shabbal Peh. You would never know it just from the psukim themselves. The rabbi stuck with the psukim, and then they demonstrate this is what it really means, right? And this became the holiday where we debated more than any other holiday. Now, Shavuot, when Shavuot takes place, is a whole different issue, right? When Sfiras Omer, when Shavuot takes place, was an argument also, because it says Mimocharas HaShabbos. With Mimocharas HaShabbos, we understand it, the second night of Pesach. Mocharas Shabbos doesn't mean Shabbos. Shabbos means Shvitas Malacha, when you don't do work. So when don't you do? After when you don't do work. So whatever day Pesach falls on, the second day is the beginning of Sfiras Omer. And when is Shavuot? 50 days later. So the Sadducee says Shavuot is always going to be on a Sunday. Always going to be on a Sunday because Mocharas HaShabbos. And the Jew and the Pharisees, the Rabbanan, said, what are you talking about? That's not what it means. Okay, but that's one argument in Shavuos. Sukkot, you can't understand the whole holiday without Torah Shabbal Peh. And so they used these sukkim to demonstrate ulakachtem lochem, usamachtem, right? And we saw, and Sukkot, every component of how, not every component, but those that the Rav highlighted to teach us this very important principle of Simchas of Sukkah is understood through the eyes of Torah Shabbal Peh. Okay? Okay. Everybody should have a wonderful day.
Oh yeah, happy Lag BaOmer.
Yes, Lag BaOmer.
It's my grandson's birthday. Born on Lag BaOmer.